Training at Quens Lake, The Making of Saboteurs, April 10, 1942. Quens Lake, Brandenburg, Germany, 75 kilometers west of Berlin. The morning mist clings to the surface of Quens Lake as 8 men step off a military transport truck onto the gravel path of a secluded estate. The grounds are surrounded by dense pine forest, the kind of place where screams wouldn't carry beyond the tree line. This is Gut Quenzi, a requisitioned country manor that now serves a singular clandestine purpose, transforming ordinary men into instruments of destruction. Lieutenant Walter Kapper, 37 years old, pudgy and bull-necked, stands at the entrance of the main building. His eyes move across the assembled group with the calculating precision of a butcher selecting cuts of meat. These 8 men are not soldiers in any conventional sense. They are something far more valuable to the Reich. Each one has lived in America, walked its streets, spoken its language without accent, blended into its fabric. 7 were members of the German-American Bund, the Nazi Party's American wing. 2 hold U.S. citizenship. George John Dasch, 39, stands near the front of the group. Lean and weathered, he has the look of a man who has worked service jobs his entire life, because he has. For years he waited tables in New York, married an American woman from Pennsylvania, even served briefly in the U.S. Army. His German is fluent, but carries the faint contamination of American idioms. Next to him is Ernst Peter Berger, 36, a naturalized American citizen whose loyalties have proven remarkably flexible. Edward John Curling, 33, stands apart from the others. Born in Wiesbaden, he joined the Nazi Party in 1928, long before it was fashionable or safe. He studied engineering at the University of Freiburg, worked various jobs across America in the 1930s, married a German émigré in New York, and joined the German-American Bund with the fervor of a true believer. When war came, he returned to the fatherland and secured work translating English broadcasts for the Wehrmacht, then moved to the Reich Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, managing German theaters. But desk work bored him. When Kapper offered him a chance to strike at the heart of America, Curling accepted without hesitation. The others fill out the roster. Heinrich Harm Heinck, 35, Richard Quirin, 34, Werner Thiel, 35, Hermann Otto Neubauer, 32, and the youngest, Herbert Hans Haupt, just 22 years old. None have intelligence experience. None have killed a man or sabotaged an industrial target. They are amateurs playing at a professional's game, and they have 3 weeks to learn the rules. Inside the estate's converted training hall, instructors from the Abwehr, German military intelligence, begin their work. The curriculum is intensive, relentless, and pragmatic. Explosives, TNT blocks, plastic compounds, detonators with timer mechanisms that can be set hours or days in advance, target selection, railroad bridges, power stations, aluminum factories, water facilities, the sinews of American industrial might. Weapons training, pistols, hand grenades, the weight and balance of tools designed to kill, and jiu-jitsu, the Japanese martial art adopted by German special forces to keep them sharp and lethal in close quarters. They practice in the woods, rigging explosives to dummy rail lines, timing their detonations to the second. They memorize false identities, complete with counterfeit birth certificates, driver's licenses, and social security cards, documents forged with such precision that even American bureaucrats wouldn't question them. They are given cover stories, entire false lives they must inhabit without hesitation, and they are given money, nearly $175,000 in American currency, divided between the 2 teams. In 1942 dollars, this is a fortune, enough to fund months of operations, bribe officials, rent apartments, buy train tickets, and disappear into the vastness of the American landscape. Kapper drills them on their targets: the hydroelectric plants at Niagara Falls, Newark Penn Station, the Hellgate Bridge in New York, other major railroad installations across the northeastern United States. The mission is ambitious to the point of audacity, a coordinated campaign of industrial sabotage designed to cripple America's war production and spread terror through its civilian population. It is Hitler's personal directive, authorized in the wake of Pearl Harbor and Germany's declaration of war on the United States. The operation has a name, Pastorius, after Francis Daniel Pastorius, the 17th century organizer of the first German settlement in America. It is meant to be poetic. It will become infamous. By early May, the training is complete. The men are as ready as 3 weeks can make them. They board trains for the French coast, where 2 U-boats wait in the submarine pens at Brest. The Atlantic crossing will take weeks. The mission, if successful, could change the course of the war. If it fails, they will die. The Atlantic crossing, journey into enemy waters, May 25th, 1942. Submarine pens, Brest, France. The U-202 and U-584 sit low in the water, their hulls slick with seawater and diesel exhaust. These are Type 70C submarines, workhorses of the Kriegsmarine's U-boat fleet, 201 feet long, capable of diving to 750 feet, armed with torpedoes and deck guns. But on this voyage they carry no extra torpedoes. Their cargo is human. 4 men descend the ladder into U-202's cramped interior. George Dasch, Ernst Berger, Heinrich Heinck, and Richard Quirin. The air inside is thick with the smell of diesel fuel, unwashed bodies, and stale bread. Every surface is damp, cold to the touch. The crew watches them with a mixture of curiosity and resentment. These landlubbers are taking up precious space, consuming rations, disrupting the boat's operational rhythm. Dasch finds a corner near the torpedo tubes and settles in for the crossing. There is nothing to do but wait. The submarine's diesel engines rumble as the boat pulls away from the dock, navigating the treacherous waters of the Bay of Biscay, where Allied aircraft patrol constantly. Once past the bay, U-202 will dive deep and stay submerged for as long as possible, surfacing only at night to recharge batteries and refresh the air. Meanwhile, U-584 departs with the second team, Edward Curling, Werner Thiel, Hermann Neubauer, and Herbert Haupt. Their destination is different, Florida, not New York, but their journey is identical in its monotony and discomfort. The Atlantic in late May is cold and rough. Waves batter the hull. Men vomit into buckets. Time loses meaning in the artificial light of the submarine's interior. Days bleed into weeks. The U-boats travel in a wide arc, avoiding known convoy routes and Allied patrol zones. They pass south of Iceland, then west across the open Atlantic, navigating by periscope sightings and dead reckoning. The submariners are professionals, veterans of the Battle of the Atlantic. They have sunk merchant ships, dodged destroyers, survived depth charge attacks that rattled their teeth and cracked their bones. But this mission is different, less about sinking tonnage and more about delivering cargo. On June 12th, U-202 reaches the waters off Long Island, New York. The submarine surfaces just after midnight, its conning tower breaking through the dark water like the fin of some prehistoric beast. The fog is thick, visibility near zero, perfect conditions for a clandestine landing. Through the periscope, the commander can just make out the dark mass of the shoreline. Dasch and his 3 companions gather their gear. Waterproof bags containing explosives, detonators, fuses, and cash. They also carry German uniforms, a calculated risk. If captured in civilian clothes, they can be executed as spies. If captured in uniform, they might be treated as prisoners of war. The plan is to wear the uniforms during the landing, then bury them before moving inland. The submarine edges closer to shore. So close the crew can hear the distant crash of waves on the beach. An inflatable raft is brought up from below and loaded with the saboteurs and their equipment. 4 sailors row them toward the beach, the oars moving silently through the water. Dasch sits in the bow, staring into the fog, his mind a storm of conflicting thoughts. This is the moment he has trained for, planned for, and now Facing it directly, he realizes he cannot go through with it. At 12:08 a.m. on June 13, 1942, the raft scrapes against the sand of Amagansett Beach. The four men step into the shallow water and begin dragging their equipment onto the shore. They are dressed in German Kriegsmarine uniforms, caps pulled low against the fog. The sailors push the raft back into the water and row toward the waiting submarine. Within minutes, U-202 will dive and disappear into the Atlantic. But Dasch and his team are not alone. Somewhere in the fog, footsteps approach. Midnight landing, Amagansett Beach, June 13, 1942, 12 to 15 a.m. Amagansett Beach, Long Island, New York. Coast Guard seaman, John C. Cullen, 21 years old, walks his patrol route along the beach with the mechanical discipline of routine. He is unarmed. Coast Guard beach patrols don't carry weapons. His job is to watch for shipwrecks, signal flares, anything unusual. Most nights, there is nothing. Tonight is different. Through the fog, Cullen sees shapes moving on the beach. He approaches cautiously, calling out, "Who's there?" Four men emerge from the mist. They are dressed strangely, and one of them speaks with a heavy accent. "Fishermen," the man says. "We ran aground waiting for dawn." Cullen's eyes adjust to the darkness. These men don't look like fishermen. Their clothes are wrong, their demeanor too tense, and he can see something else, boxes being dragged across the sand. The leader of the group steps forward. It is George Dasch, and in this moment, he makes a decision that will alter the course of the entire operation. He could kill Cullen. One quick motion, a knife in the dark, a body buried in the sand. Orders demand it. But Dasch has already decided this mission will fail. He wants it to fail. "How old are you?" Dasch asks. 21, Cullen replies, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his veins. "You have a father, a mother." "Yes." Dasch reaches into his pocket and pulls out a roll of bills. He peels off $300 and presses it into Cullen's hand. "Take this. Forget you saw us. Go back to your station. You saw nothing tonight." Cullen takes the money, his fingers closing around the bills. He nods slowly, then turns and walks back toward the Coast Guard station. But he doesn't forget. He doesn't stay silent. Dasch watches him disappear into the fog. He turns to Berger, Heinck, and Quirin. "Bury everything. The uniforms, the explosives. We need to get to the train station before dawn." They work quickly, digging shallow pits in the sand and burying 4 large wooden boxes containing explosives, timing devices, fuses, and incendiary materials. The German uniforms are stripped off and buried as well. Now dressed in civilian clothes, the 4 men look like any other travelers, rumpled, tired, unremarkable. By 2 a.m., they reach the Amagansett train station. A ticket clerk sells them 4 tickets to New York City without a second glance. The first train departs at 6:30 a.m. They wait in the shadows, smoking cigarettes, saying nothing. Back at the Coast Guard station, Cullen bursts through the door. "There are men on the beach, Germans. They gave me money." His commanding officer, Chief Boatswain's mate Warren Barnes, initially dismisses the story. But Cullen is insistent and the money is real. Barnes organizes a patrol. At dawn, Barnes and a team of Coast Guardsmen return to the beach. The fog has lifted slightly, and in the pale morning light, they find what Cullen described: fresh footprints in the sand, disturbed earth, and partially buried wooden crates. Barnes orders his men to dig. They unearth the boxes, pry them open, and stare at the contents: blocks of TNT, timing devices, German uniforms with Kriegsmarine insignia. Barnes immediately calls the FBI office in New York. By 9 a.m., federal agents are on their way to Amagansett. But by then, Dasch and his team are already in Manhattan, checking into hotels and disappearing into the city's vast anonymity. The encounter. Diverging paths. June 13 to 17, 1942. New York City and Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. New York swallows the 4 saboteurs whole. George Dasch checks into the Governor Clinton Hotel on 7th Avenue. Ernst Berger takes a room nearby. Heinck and Quirin find lodging in Queens. They are supposed to begin reconnaissance on their targets: Penn Station, the Hellgate Bridge, power plants in New Jersey. They are supposed to purchase materials, scout locations, prepare for months of coordinated strikes. But Dasch has other plans. On June 15th, just 2 days after landing, Dasch walks to a payphone on the Upper West Side. He dials the FBI's New York office. When an agent answers, Dasch says, "I need to speak to J. Edgar Hoover. I have information about German saboteurs operating in the United States." The agent on the other end assumes it's a crank call. Hundreds of such calls flood FBI switchboards every week. Paranoid citizens reporting neighbors with German accents, waiters who serve schnitzel, anyone who seems remotely suspicious. Dasch hangs up in frustration. He tells Berger about the call. Berger, a naturalized American who has also grown disillusioned with the Nazi regime, agrees they need to turn themselves in. But they decide Washington, D.C. is the better option, closer to FBI headquarters, closer to Hoover himself. On June 19th, Dasch takes a train to Washington. He checks into the Mayflower Hotel, one of the city's finest. Then he walks directly to FBI headquarters on Pennsylvania Avenue. He tells the receptionist, "I need to speak to J. Edgar Hoover. I'm a German saboteur." The receptionist stares at him. Dasch is well-dressed, calm, speaking fluent English with barely a trace of an accent. He doesn't look like a spy. But protocol demands she alert a senior agent. Within minutes, Dasch is ushered into an interrogation room. For 8 days, FBI agents question him. At first, they don't believe his story. It sounds too fantastical. German submarines, saboteurs landing on American beaches, explosives buried in the sand. But Dasch provides details. The names of the other saboteurs, their physical descriptions, the locations where they buried their equipment, the targets they were supposed to hit. He even tells them about the second team, scheduled to land in Florida. FBI agents are dispatched to Dasch's hotel room at the Mayflower. There, hidden in his luggage, they find $82,500 in cash, part of the $175,000 the saboteurs were given. The money is real. The story is real. Meanwhile, on June 17th, U-584 surfaces off the coast of Florida near Ponte Vedra Beach, just south of Jacksonville. Edward Curling leads the second team ashore. Werner Thiel, Hermann Neubauer, and Herbert Haupt. Unlike Dasch's chaotic landing, this one proceeds smoothly. There are no Coast Guard patrols, no witnesses. The 4 men bury their equipment in the sand, change into civilian clothes, and board a bus to Jacksonville. From Jacksonville, they take trains north, Curling and Thiel to New York, Neubauer and Haupt to Chicago. Their targets include industrial facilities in the Midwest, aluminum plants critical to aircraft production, but they will never reach them. Crisis of conscience. Dasch's decision. June 1942. FBI headquarters, Washington, D.C. George Dasch sits across from Special Agent Dwayne Traynor in a windowless interrogation room. The fluorescent lights hum overhead. A stenographer records every word. For 8 hours a day, Dasch talks. He tells them everything. His life in America, the years waiting tables, the American wife, the disillusionment with Nazi Germany, his recruitment by Lieutenant Walter Kappa, the training at Quens Lake, the submarine crossing, the landing at Amagansett. He describes the other men in painstaking detail. Berger's naturalized citizenship, Heinck's mechanical skills, Quirin's loyalty to the Reich. He draws maps showing where the explosives are buried. He lists the targets: Niagara Falls, Penn Station, Hellgate Bridge, aluminum factories. "Why are you telling us this?" Traynor asks. Dasch pauses, choosing his words carefully. "I never intended to carry out the mission. From the moment I stepped onto that beach, I knew I would turn myself in. I couldn't live with the guilt. Innocent people would die." It's a convenient narrative, one that frames Dasch as a reluctant hero rather than a failed saboteur. The FBI agents aren't sure they believe it, but they don't need to believe it. They only need his information. On June 20th, FBI agents arrest Ernst Berger at his hotel in New York. He confirms Dasch's story, adding details about the training and the mission objectives. With 2 of the saboteurs in custody and full cooperation, the FBI launches the largest manhunt in its history. Reich and Quirin are arrested in New York on June 22nd. They are found in a Queens boarding house, still carrying forged documents and some of the cash given to them in Germany. Neither resists arrest. The net tightens around the second team. On June 23rd, Edward Curling is arrested in New York. Werner Thiel is taken into custody the same day. Hermann Neubauer and Herbert Haupt are arrested in Chicago on June 27th. Within 2 weeks of landing on American soil, all 8 saboteurs are in FBI custody. Not a single act of sabotage has been committed. Not a single bridge blown, not a single factory damaged, not a single American harmed. Operation Pastorius is a complete and utter failure. The confession inside the FBI, June 22-30, 1942, Federal Bureau of Investigation nationwide. The arrest of the 8 saboteurs triggers a media frenzy. On June 28th, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover holds a press conference, announcing the capture of German spies on American soil. He does not mention George Dasch's voluntary surrender. Instead, he credits the FBI's vigilance and investigative prowess. Newspapers across the country run banner headlines: Nazi spies captured, German saboteurs foiled, FBI smashes Reich plot. The public reaction is a mixture of fear and relief. Fear that the enemy has reached American shores, that the war is no longer a distant abstraction fought on foreign soil. Relief that the plot was stopped before any damage occurred. Security measures intensify across the country. Immigrant communities, particularly German Americans, face increased scrutiny and suspicion. In Washington, President Franklin D. Roosevelt convenes a meeting with his military advisors and Attorney General Francis Biddle. The question before them is simple but consequential. How should these men be tried? Biddle argues for a civilian trial. The saboteurs were arrested on American soil by American law enforcement and should be subject to American criminal courts. But Roosevelt overrules him. These men are enemy combatants, unlawful belligerents, who entered the United States in secret with the intent to wage war. They will be tried by military tribunal. On July 2, 1942, Roosevelt issues Proclamation 2561, establishing a military commission to try the 8 saboteurs. The commission consists of 7 Army generals. The trial will be closed to the public. The proceedings will be swift. The saboteurs are held at the District of Columbia jail under heavy guard. Their appointed defense attorneys argue that the military commission lacks jurisdiction, that as civilians arrested on American soil, the saboteurs are entitled to trial by jury in a civilian court. The case, styled Ex parte Quirin, is fast-tracked to the U.S. Supreme Court. On July 29 and 30, 1942, the Supreme Court hears oral arguments. The justices convene a special session, understanding the urgency and national security implications. On July 31st, the court issues a brief per curiam decision. The military tribunal is constitutional. The saboteurs are unlawful combatants and therefore subject to military justice. A full written opinion will follow later. But the verdict is clear. The trial will proceed. The manhunt, closing the net, June 23, 27, 1942, New York City and Chicago. With Dasch and Berger in custody and cooperating fully, the FBI moves with lethal efficiency. Special agents fan out across New York, Chicago, and other major cities, armed with detailed descriptions, aliases, and last known locations. Heinrich Heink and Richard Quirin are the first targets. FBI agents trace them to a boarding house in Queens through a combination of hotel registries and surveillance. On June 22nd, agents surround the building at dawn. There is no shootout, no dramatic escape. Reich and Quirin surrender without resistance. In their room, agents find forged documents, nearly $20,000 in cash, and a list of industrial targets. Edward Curling proves more elusive. As the leader of the Florida team and a dedicated Nazi Party member since 1928, he is disciplined and cautious. But Dasch has provided the FBI with the names of Curling's contacts in New York, including his estranged wife, Marie. Agents place surveillance on her apartment. On June 23rd, Curling makes the mistake of visiting her. FBI agents move in as he exits the building. He is arrested on the street, handcuffed, and transported to federal custody. Werner Thiel is arrested the same day in a separate location in Manhattan. He offers no resistance. That leaves Hermann Neubauer and Herbert Haupt, both last seen boarding a train for Chicago. Haupt, at 22, is the youngest of the saboteurs. He was born in Germany but grew up in Chicago, making him intimately familiar with the city. Neubauer is 32, methodical and quiet. The FBI's Chicago field office takes the lead. Agents stake out Haupt's known associates, including his parents, who still live in Chicago. On June 27th, Haupt makes contact with his father. FBI agents follow him to an apartment on the north side. They wait until he is alone, then execute the arrest. Neubauer is taken into custody hours later at a nearby hotel. All 8 saboteurs are now in federal custody. The entire operation, from landing to arrest, has lasted just 2 weeks. Not a single target has been attacked. Not a single American casualty. It is a humiliating defeat for German intelligence and a propaganda victory for the United States. Justice swift and severe. The Military Tribunal, July 8th, August 4th, 1942. The Department of Justice Building, Washington, D.C. The trial begins on July 8th, 1942, in a heavily guarded 5th-floor room in the Department of Justice Building. The Military Commission consists of 7 Army generals, presided over by Major General Frank McCoy. The prosecution is led by Attorney General Francis Biddle and Army Judge Advocate General Myron Kramer. The defense attorneys are military officers assigned to the case, under-resourced and overwhelmed. The 8 saboteurs sit in 2 rows, dressed in civilian clothes, flanked by armed military police. George Dasch and Ernst Berger appear calm, almost detached. They have been promised leniency in exchange for their cooperation. The other 6, Reich, Quirin, Curling, Thiel, Neubauer and Haupt, look haggard, their faces drawn with the knowledge of what is coming. The charges are read aloud. Violation of the laws of war, conspiracy to commit sabotage, spying for a foreign power. The prosecution presents its case methodically. FBI agents testify about the arrests, the discovery of buried explosives, the interrogations. The explosives and timing devices are entered as evidence, tangible proof of intent. Dasch and Berger testify against the others, recounting the training at Quens Lake, the submarine crossings, the detailed plans to destroy American infrastructure. The defense argues that the saboteurs never carried out any acts of sabotage, that intent alone should not warrant execution. They point out that 2 of the men, Berger and Haupt, are U.S. citizens and therefore entitled to constitutional protections. But the prosecution counters that citizenship is irrelevant in cases of unlawful belligerency. These men entered the United States in secret, in the service of a foreign military, with the express purpose of waging war. They are not entitled to the protections afforded to lawful combatants or ordinary criminals. The trial lasts 3 weeks. On August 4th, the Commission delivers its verdict, guilty on all counts. Sentencing is swift. 6 of the saboteurs, Reich, Quirin, Curling, Thiel, Neubauer and Haupt, are sentenced to death. Dasch and Berger, in recognition of their cooperation, are sentenced to 30 years and life imprisonment, respectively. President Roosevelt reviews the sentences and approves them. He commutes Dasch's sentence to 30 years and Berger's to life, but upholds the death sentences for the other 6. Executions and Aftermath, August 8, 1942. District of Columbia Jail, Washington, D.C. At dawn on August 8, 1942, 6 men are led from their cells. They are dressed in simple prison garb, their hands bound behind their backs. There are no reporters present, no witnesses outside the prison staff and military officials. This execution will be swift, clinical, and secret. The electric chair has been prepared. Each man is executed individually. Heinrich Heinz goes first, then Richard Quirin, then Edward Curling. Werner Thiel, Hermann Neubauer, and Herbert Haupt follow. The process takes less than 3 hours. Their bodies are buried in unmarked graves in a potter's field outside Washington. No markers, no memorials, no acknowledgement of their existence. The U.S. government releases a brief statement confirming the executions, but provides no details. George Dasch and Ernst Berger are transferred to federal penitentiaries. They will serve their sentences in isolation, reviled by fellow prisoners as traitors. In 1948, President Harry S. Truman grants them executive clemency on the condition that they be permanently deported to the American occupation zone in Germany. They are released and flown to Frankfurt, forbidden from ever returning to the United States. Dasch spends the rest of his life in Germany, bitter and disillusioned. He writes a memoir, argues that he was a hero who saved American lives, insists that the U.S. government betrayed him. Few believe him. He dies in obscurity in 1992, convinced to the end that history will vindicate him. Operation Pastorius becomes a case study in the failures of German intelligence. The Abwehr conducts an internal investigation and concludes that the operation was doomed from the start. Poorly planned, inadequately trained operatives, insufficient vetting. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, already under suspicion for his lack of enthusiasm for the Nazi regime, faces increased scrutiny. The failure of Operation Pastorius contributes to the eventual dismantling of the Abwehr and its absorption into the SS-controlled Reich Security Main Office. For the United States, Operation Pastorius is a propaganda coup. The FBI's rapid apprehension of the saboteurs, carefully spun as brilliant detective work rather than voluntary surrender, boosts public confidence. Security measures are tightened along the coasts. Civil defense programs expand. The fear that the enemy might strike the homeland becomes a rallying cry for increased vigilance and war production. The Supreme Court's decision in Ex parte Quirin establishes a legal precedent that will be cited for decades. It affirms the government's authority to detain and try unlawful combatants through military tribunals, a precedent invoked again in the 21st century during the War on Terror. On a windswept beach in Amagansett, a small plaque is eventually installed, marking the spot where the saboteurs landed. It reads simply, "On this beach, Nazi saboteurs came ashore on June 13, 1942. They were captured by the FBI." It does not mention George Dasch's name. It does not mention that he walked into FBI headquarters and gave himself up. History, it seems, prefers a simpler narrative. But the truth remains. 8 men came to America to wage war. One of them couldn't go through with it. And because of that single act of conscience, or cowardice, depending on who tells the story, Operation Pastorius failed before it ever truly began.